Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to a joint public hearing from the Advisory Committee, Public Safety Subcommittee, and the CTO&S. My name is David Mark Goldstein. I'm the chair of the Public Safety Subcommittee. With us today from Public Safety is Jocelyn Murphy, Janice Kahn, Neil Gordon, Elisa Jonas, and Donnell O'Neill. And we're welcoming C2NS to be part of this public hearing.
And Liz Linder. No?
Liz, I'm sorry, I didn't see her on the screen. Yes, Liz, I'm sorry about that.
Hi.
And I'd like to also welcome the petitioners of Warrant Article 11 to the hearing as well. Let me explain briefly how this is going to go. CTUNS will not be voting on Warrant Article 11 tonight. This is just the public hearing for them, and they'll have a subsequent hearing where they will vote at some future date. Public safety, if we feel we're ready to vote, we'll make a motion at the end of the meeting to do so. Otherwise, we'll have a second meeting. We'll see where we're at that point. And I see Donnell's coming back in. And Donnell, we will treat everybody on both committees as equal members, so you can always jump in with questions and or comments. And Marissa is here now. And hopefully it'll be civil and we won't fight over each one to comment.
And
We're,
if
we're, we're pretty
if
good.
I could add, I'm Dick Benko from the Committee on Town Organization and Structure, and we are joined by members of the committee: Kate Poverman, Sean Lynn Jones, Ian Rothman, Harry Bors, and Jean Berg. The chair will be joining us shortly. So thank
Here's
you.
Jean right now, so Jean's timing is perfect. For the members of the public, this is a public hearing, and we are looking forward to hearing from all of you with questions and or comments. What we'll do is we'll start with a presentation from the lead petitioner, which should be about 5 minutes, give or take. And then we'll open it up to a round of questions from the two committees, and then we'll open it up for a public hearing where the public can ask questions or comment all they like. And then we'll go into deliberations, at least the Public Safety Committee will at some point, and we'll see where we're at that point. So Rebecca, do you have any presentation? Would you like to be a co-host?
I have nothing that needs a screen. I have just the words, and given what CTO&S asked me to do with this presentation a week ago, I would appreciate your indulgence by a couple of minutes over
Oh,
5.
absolutely. Take as long as you like. The floor is yours. Thank you for
All
coming.
right, thanks. Thanks, everybody. I am Rebecca Stone. I am a town meeting member from Precinct 3, and I want to start by acknowledging my co-petitioners on this article, Kelly Hardebeck, Alec Lebovitz, Kim Smith, and Marissa Vogt, who, by the way, was mistakenly listed as a town meeting member from Precinct 4, but in fact is a member from Precinct 6. My apologies to Marissa and to the rest of you for getting that wrong on our original submission. So this article grew out of all of the petitioners' collective experience serving both as elected and appointed participants in Brookline government over many years, and our shared sense also from our professional lives that the town's organization and structure would benefit from being subject to a more regular, predictable, and public review. That's what this warrant article seeks to do. Building on the existing resource and expertise of the Committee on Town Organization and Structure. The article changes just one sentence in the general duties as already described in CTO&S's current bylaw, where it now says may from time to time, we say shall in specified years, and then every 10. The what part of what's to be done is unchanged. So whatever the existing understanding is of what review government structure and operations that should continue to guide the work. The article also proposes to allocate to the Select Board one appointment each year to this committee. Because the committee was created long before we had a town administrator, and because its charge overlaps with authorities that are now vested in the town administrator relating to operating departments and committees and making recommendations about those, it made sense to the petitioners to make this a shared appointment authority with the executive, leaving the majority of appointments still in the hands of the moderator. The other advantage of the change is in transparency. The moderator makes appointments without a public process. The select board's process involves public interviews and decisions, and we thought that would be an improvement in opening up the committee's work to the public. So in discussing the article, excuse me, with members of CTO&S last week and before it was filed, a number of questions have been raised. I was asked to address them if I could, so I'm going to try, though I cannot possibly cover them all. So the first one, is this really about form of government? And that one is easy. No. We haven't changed any of the language in the existing bylaw about the nature of CTO&S's mission. It's about ongoing scrutiny with the aim of improving organization and structure within the current standard form of representative town meeting that Brookline voted to adopt in 1942. The second thing that's been brought up is the need for staff support for this kind of a study. The lack of sufficient staff support is a perennial complaint, as all of you know, of Brookline citizen committees. And the lack of staff to provide that support is a perennial worry of the town administrator and his staff. So the original proposal for CTO&S back in 1959 was actually explicit that a committee like CTO&S needed that support from staff in order to do its work. And at least they believed at the time that they had built it into the original bylaw. Well, apparently that hasn't lasted, if it ever existed. Gene Berg told me that the lack of staff support for the current CTO&S has slowed its progress on some things. And that's why this warrant article explicitly states that for the purposes of this mandated decennial review, the committee can opt to hire consulting assistants when it undertakes this task. So again, that introduces a cost to the town. The budget implications of the new component are reflected in the proposal saying we're going to wait to do the first review until fiscal 28. That avoids complicating this year's already very complicated budget. And also, just to note, because this is a decennial review, the budget implication is periodic, not ongoing in terms of budget, town implications. So, big question: why CTO&S? So many of Brookline's municipal and civic leaders over many decades have expressed the view that this kind of government review is both healthy and appropriate. And I want to share just one example of that with you from former town administrator Richard Leary, who wrote in the town's annual report of 1991, which was just after the Second Amendment to the Town Administrators Act. And I want to give you what he said, because he also underscored the central role of CTO&S. And here's what he wrote. The town of Brookline, like many other public or private institutions, must be prepared to make changes in its organization and structure to cope with changing conditions. We are fortunate that we have the machinery in place to recommend desirable changes in the town's organization in the authority conferred on the town administrator and the Committee on Town Organization and Structure by statute and by law. So that's the end of what he wrote. So in answer to the question, why CTO&S for this? Well, because CTO&S was established to do this really important work. It also, by the way, has a long and very honorable history of leaning into that charge. So for example, in 1968, 10 years after the ad hoc study of government that led to the creation of CTO&S, this committee did a 2-year study of government that followed the Home Rule Act of 1966. That study surfaced issues of administrative overload on the select board, and it made recommendations that, quote, allowed the board more time for policy matters by transferring some routine duties and by changing meeting schedules and procedures. That quote comes from the report on what CTO&S's recommendations had actually accomplished. In 1973, at the request of the moderator, and following the 1972 expansion of voting districts in Brookline from 12 to 16, CTO&S did another deep dive, this time into the workload of town meeting. Ultimately, it recommended a committee structure that did not subsequently materialize, but it did lead to improvements in preparing town meeting members well ahead of consideration of the warrant and especially of the budget. In 1985, following a League of Women Voters study that raised concerns about the diffuseness of executive authority, CTO&S did an in-depth study of the executive branch of government, concluding that a more defined relationship between the select board and the executive secretary and clearer lines of authority for departments was needed to improve efficiency and accountability. That, in turn, led to the Town Administrators Act of 1985, the most significant thing that we've done to our structure and organization since we adopted the representative town meeting. So I'm going to stop there in terms of examples of what CTO&S has done in the past. It's a terrific record. CTO&S, I think, should be really proud of it. So next question is, what is a review of government? What's the scope? Well, as I said, we haven't changed any of the language. So what you already understand to be a review of government continues to be a review of government. But here's what we've envisioned for this kind of thing. The first order of business for the committee, that's when it's anticipating a review, a government review year, would be whether or not to hire that consultant. And in hiring a consultant, they're going to need to do some initial conversation about the scope because the consultant will need to know. But just in general, typical of charter reviews, of past Brookline government reviews, and of analogous reviews in the private sector, what do they look at? They look at the elements of government such as decision-making authority, workflows, administrative systems and coherence, transparency, and public accountability. Charter review committees in places that have charters, the scope is the entire charter, and the work of the review committee is to go through and surface where the issues are that they want to focus in on in that particular review. This would be much the same. That's certainly the way we envisioned it. One of the advantages of CTO&S having this responsibility is that in the years between such studies, what happens can help inform that review. So, for example, if a review is coming up, the select board or town meeting might refer any number of issues or articles for inclusion in that review, rather than creating myriad new ad hoc committees each time an article pertaining to structure isn't considered ready or isn't sufficiently fleshed out. So I know that there are more questions. I know that the advisory committee subcommittee will have new questions, but I'm going to end there and trust that if I haven't answered something, it'll come back. All right. Thanks so much.
Okay. Thank you. So first, I'd like to welcome Jean to our meeting. The way I look at Article 11, there are two very distinct pieces of this. There is the appointing part and the periodic review part, which are probably should have been two separate warrant articles because they are substantially different. But as far as our conversation goes, is it the consensus that we want to just take questions on both at the same time, or do you want to divide it up so we'll discuss the appointing part first and the review of government second? How do you guys on CTO&S want to do this?
Hardly seems to matter,
Sorry?
but it hardly seems to matter.
Okay, what about public safety? Are you okay with just mixing the two into one?
I don't know. Maybe does it make sense to focus on one and debate that before going to the other, unless there's an intertwining of those two, and maybe those people on, maybe there's something I'm missing about how those are related and how that would limit our debate.
Well, I would certainly start with the charge to the annual study, not the pointing.
Okay.
On the other hand, but never mind, yes.
You can get rid of the appointing easier, quicker.
Yeah, it's like one and done.
So
I think that's
I would
potential.
say let's treat them separately until we find that we identify the intertwined parts, right? Because otherwise we're going to be back and forth and not having a coherent discussion. I would start with I think the composition
Okay.
of CTO&S. It seems straightforward. And there's no question in my mind it's going to end up intertwined. But let's
Isn't
start
this
there.
to hear from the public rather than for us to have this discussion at this point?
No.
Yeah, right
Public safety
now,
is-
all the public members are also co-petitioners, and they're welcome to chime in.
Not Mr. Rosenthal.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Marty. He's on the
So
he's on the phone at the moment.
I agree with, I think we should take it differently, and I can think of a couple of reasons why we should do it. There will be an overlap, but there is definitely also a separation here. And so I would be in favor of not combining the two.
Okay, and Sean?
Well, maybe we should resolve the question of what we're going to take up first. I'll just say I have a specific question regarding to the appointment process. So I would be in favor of taking that up first. Since
Okay, then let's do that, and go ahead, Sean.
well, this is just really a question, an informational question, because Rebecca mentioned, and I think we're all aware, that the select board and the moderator adopt a different procedure when making their appointments. The select board posts vacancies for committees, people submit resumes, they go for interviews, and the select board votes. The moderator in filling positions on the advisory committee, CTO&S, and on moderators committees, well, obviously can't have a meeting because the moderator is an individual and the process hasn't worked the same. So my question is there anything in the bylaw, and this may be for town council, the former moderator and former select board members here, as well as the petitioner, is there anything in the bylaws that mandates the procedures that have been used, evolving over the years by the select board and the moderator for making appointments? Or is this basically just tradition and choice? Obviously, I know the select board has to vote, in an open meeting, but that's, one difference there. But a lot of other things happen between the, application and the appointment.
Who wants to take that? Rebecca? Should I throw
No,
it to
I don't
Joe?
want to take that.
Okay.
Joe, isn't Joe here?
Yeah, Joe. Donnell, you have a
Yeah, so let's think about what happened in 2020 after the George Floyd incident when I got appointed to the Moderators Committee. Remember, there was a whole big thing about that, Deborah Brown. So something came up back then where, in regards to mandate on how appointments are done, it was kind of left in the air on the up to the moderator. That's what I remember.
there is a bylaw that says that to the extent possible, one member of advisory should come from every precinct. So there are certain, guidelines within the bylaws. Joe, you've unmuted yourself. Do you have
I wasn't thinking about the, geographical distribution or qualifications, just, do you do interviews or not, for example?
Joe?
I only unmuted myself to answer. I would have to look into that. So.
David Mark, may I be heard on this issue?
Yeah, I was about to call you, but I guess, Sean, that'll probably be a question for your next meeting with CTO&S on this issue. Marty?
Well, just on this issue, I wasn't going to talk much about it, but I think there is an issue on the appointment by the select board, because in my view, the CTO&S is under the legislative branch of our government. And if you look at the bylaws, that's the only place I can point to where that's definitely true. It's in the first section under legislature. I think it's the first section, as like the federal constitution. And I think that having the select board make the appointments, in my view, is a bad idea because of separation of powers. And I know that's a very esoteric issue. It's also very hard to pinpoint exactly its application. I've been looking at it in the context of the SJC decision about funding the bar advocates. And I've also been intrigued about presidential immunity and so forth, and what Congress is abdicating on war powers. I think that it's important that CTO&S not get combined with select board appointments, frankly. And the select board is much more political than moderators. Moderators have been political and are political, but not as much as the select board. So that's an esoteric point that I personally feel is counterindicated to the appointment process. I have other thoughts on the article in general, but you're dividing. I got an important phone call, and I think you've divided the.
It's a public hearing, so you can come on back at any time, Marty. Neil Gordon.
Yeah, thank you. I'll remind the Public Safety Subcommittee and inform the rest of the folks on this call that we just took up Article 10, which talked about conflicts in appointments and serving on more than one committee. And the essence of what we in short order voted favorable recommendation of favorable action is that there should not be overlap of executives on the advisory committee because it is a legislative committee. That sort of sailed through without much controversy. And I think that's true here too. I look at the petitioner's explanation and the argument for having a joint committee that includes select board members really goes to the review question, which is, a periodic, every 10-year review. And so maybe we concede that if that's the case, select board input is in fact important. But there is the, 9-year and 11-month interim where CTO&S takes up all sorts of issues of warrant articles and the like. And I think that independent legislative review by CTO&S without, in essence, a vote of the select board on recommending and then yet another vote of their appointees on CTO&S, a body which, by the way, has zero authority other than their bully pulpit of recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Alec Lebowitz.
Thanks, David Mark. I just wanted to comment briefly on the question of joint appointment authority. We did discuss this briefly in the previous CTO&S meeting, and one of the points that surfaced in that discussion was we already do have several town bodies that have joint appointment authority that is shared between the legislature and the executive. A few of the examples that we talked about last time were the audit committee, the CPA committee. Another recent example you might point to is the expenditure and revenue study committee. And I think those bodies share something in common with CTO&S, which is their charge and mission is cross-cutting for whole of government, and also that their results and the processes which they oversee do require compromise and do require buy-in from the multiple branches. I think, in the case of the audit committee, you want an audit that everyone is confident, is rigorous, and is comfortable standing behind. The CPA, by its very design, is meant for joint authority and power sharing and balancing competing priorities. And I think questions of structure fall into that same bucket in many regards. Structure is something that certainly touches whole of government. Structural changes, I think, are something that require significant engagement across the branches and significant buy-in. So I would encourage people to maybe think about the joint appointment authority in that light. And one other comment I just wanted to raise here as well was that the state of Massachusetts, you might argue, it really is kind of the poster child for institutionalizing joint appointment authority. For anyone who's done any work with a state body or adjacent to a state body, they are almost always shared joint appointment authority. They'll apportion some number of seats to the House, to the Senate, to the governor or their designees. And my anecdotal experience from observing some complex state processes where that's worked is sharing power and sharing responsibility has been important to their success. So I just wanted to add that to this discussion. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to welcome Kate McGill. This is a public hearing, so if there's anything you'd like to say, you can raise your hand. Janice Kahn, you're next.
Yes, unless you want to take public comment.
Well, we're sort of combining it all right now.
Okay. So I want to go back to something that Marty Rosenthal brought up, which is that CTO&S is under the legislative branch. And Rebecca went through a whole lot of achievements, really, of CTO&S, really excellent work that has been done over the years by CTO&S. And so it seems to me that its current appointment and authority seems to be working. But more than that, I've noticed, having been now in government through 3 town administrators, each town administrator seems to have a different relationship to both the select board and to town meeting. And that goes back to what Neil just said about the select board being a more political body, of course, elected by the public. Um, and I'm just wondering whether whether what's working is important rather than factoring in, that seems to be something that has is less I don't know how to say this, sort of less subject to the vagaries of, say, a town administrator who may have a very different approach depending on experience that they bring to the town versus the moderators committee, which I think the goal is to have a pretty broad, um, broad-based body to look at issues. That's it.
Thank you. Elisa.
Yeah, hi. I can see benefits to both. What I like about the moderator appointing is that they can look at who's out there in the world and decide, gee, these people have a lot of experience, they're analytic, they whatever, and can select from that body whoever they choose, which has its positives and negatives. But the select board, it's whoever applies for the position, and that limits who the appointing authority can actually bring in. On the other hand, I'm thinking, gee, the select board, being in the midst of being the select board, is possibly one of the best entities to be able to figure out what's not working and what is working. But then on the other hand, there's the conflict of interest. If it's a select board having more power and who makes the appointments, will they try to appoint people who will preserve their role? So I'm just wondering what inspired, is there something in particular that inspired any of the petitioners to change, to propose a change in how the appointments are done? Or is it more from a just theoretical, we should have transparency, we should have some people that are chosen via public hearings and a more open process? I don't know, can anyone,
I mean,
Rebecca, I don't know.
Elisa, I can respond to that, but I think Kelly Hardebeck wanted to say something about this, so maybe I'll just, if you want to.
Sure,
Mark,
Kelly.
you want to recognize Kelly?
Oh, yeah, Kelly, go ahead.
Sure. Thanks, Rebecca, and thanks, Elisa, for the question. As we were going through and drafting this article, one of the things that we thought about very carefully was the appointing authority and the process. And while this moderator has made great steps to improve the transparency of how he appoints members to committees, the level of transparency that the select board has was something that we took into consideration and felt honestly would encourage a wider diversity and variety of folks to apply for the positions, and also the vetting. And so again, it's really increased transparency through the select board process that we were seeking. Again, not that the moderator is doing anything wrong, but the moderator's process is can vary based on who is the moderator. And so again, encouraging greater transparency in the appointments was part of the goals of this.
Okay, thank you. Marty, then Sean, then Neil.
Just on the appointment process, I want to thank Alec for reminding me of something which is, as some of you know, I also get involved in some statewide stuff. And I've been on at least 2 state committees that impacted court stuff. And I felt that the more political appointments were much too political. And I don't use political as a dirty word. Some of you heard me say this. Politics, in my view, is a very good word. But the problem is, I think that when there's excessive politics, that can not corrupt, but negatively impact a process. And I just view the select board as being more political than moderators. Now, some of you know, I was critical of our current moderator for some appointments on a moderators committee recently, but we're all human beings and we all screw up. And so moderators can screw up too, but so can select board members. I just think that they're too political. And this committee, if it got created every, 10 years or whatever, one of the things they're supposed to be looking at is the select board. And it strikes me that's all the more reason that separation of powers should be continued. That's it. I'll save my other issues on the other stuff later.
Okay, thank you. Sean?
I will lay my cards on the table right away. And I think I'm agreeing with Marty here. I'm concerned about having the select board appoint members because the select board has an agenda. And that's a good thing. We should have a select board with an agenda. They should have policy and politics in their minds. On the whole, the moderator doesn't have an agenda. Or if they do have an agenda, it might be to finish town meeting in 3 nights instead of 4, but not the kind of agenda of townwide policies that the select board is supposed to have and should have. So that's why I like the idea of having the moderator make appointments to CTO&S. On the question of transparency, I raised this earlier. I don't think there's anything to stop moderators from being more transparent or to force the select board to be transparent. And if we wanted to address that particular issue, either with CTO&S or moderators' appointments more generally, we might be able to get at it through a bylaw that required a certain process. But this bylaw amendment doesn't do that. It just injects the select board into the appointing of CTO&S members. And just a quick comment on the committees that Alec mentioned. The composition of the Community Preservation Committee, as it's known in state law, the CPA committee, as we've renamed it here in Brookline, is largely determined by state law. So who serves on it is really not our choice. It has to come from certain bodies like the Conservation Commission and so on. And my quick review of the committees that are established by state law or by law, it suggests that it's rare for the select board to appoint a majority. On the audit committee, the select board, I think, gets just 1 member. So they're a little bit different than having the select board appoint a majority of CTO&S members, as this warrant article would change the bylaw, to do. So that's just my reaction on both the question of the merits and the process here of changing the appointing authority.
Sean, excuse me, just one thing. I think you just said that the bylaw would change so that the select board had a majority appointment.
All right, yeah, no,
and that's
3.
That's not right. We were
3 out of 4.
Right.
3 out of 7.
We very specifically left the majority in the hands of the moderator. To Janice's point, because it's not we're not saying it's broken. We're just saying maybe it could be better. That's
yeah, but the point was that the select board usually on the standing committee, like audit, appoints a very small number. That's our example we keep coming back to, where there is shared appointing authority. And for the committees that are appointed from time to time, like the Beacon Street Bridle Path Committee, we set up a membership and an appointment process that's unique and really tailored to what's going to happen with that committee. And I think that the expenditures and revenue study committee probably fits into that category too. And they're not good general models, unlike the standing committees, including CTO&S.
Okay, I'm going to take the next shot, and then Neil can follow me with something that Rebecca just said. And I came into this when I was first reading it with the similar idea that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I didn't see anything wrong with the way the moderator appointed CTO&S. I will say that CTO&S is probably the most respected committee in this town, even more so than the Public Safety Subcommittee. But they have a well-deserved reputation of not only doing thorough work, but coming out with really good recommendations. And they are pretty much the envy of that as far as all the other committees go to. They are the gold standard. So to change it, my initial reaction was, it ain't broke, leave it alone. My problem with what I'm perceiving here is that it interjects politics into CTO&S by having the select. The select board is a political group. There are times in the past, and certainly there will be times in the future, when the select board are a very partisan group. And whoever they appoint to CTO&S will presumably carry the same philosophy that they have, whatever that happens to be. And there will be pressure on those political appointments to follow whatever the select board would like to see happen on any given issue. They will always be looked at as the political appointments within C2 and S. So you're also creating basically a divide between the political appointments and the moderator appointments. And I'm just not comfortable with that. It also, without meaning to, I don't think you intended this, but it's certainly going to embarrass the moderator if town meeting is taking away his appointment authority. And I think it's incumbent upon you petitioners to show proof that that needs to be done. You have to show that the moderator has not been making good appointments or is taking some people, applicants seriously, or do something to show that this is necessary. And so far in the explanation and everything else, you've done nothing to prove moderator hasn't done anything less than an absolutely exemplary job in putting these people onto CTO&S. Since you're not providing any proof that this needs to be done, and since it would instill politics into a group that's, at least with the moderator appointing, is seen as more objective and above the fray, I think we should leave this alone. I think that, in the old who polices the police question, do we really want the executive to have more sway in a political group trying to look at things objectively? And I'm troubled by that. I have thoughts on the other, which I'll get to later, but I just wanted to throw that in there so I can say I've said my piece. Thank you. Neil.
So in whatever order, I agree with David, Mark, agree with Marty, agree with Sean. I want to point out in the ordinary course of town meeting, the select board holds hearings, has recommendations on warrant articles, as of course does the advisory committee. CTO&S, where it matters to CTO&S, is inappropriate, does the same thing and makes a recommendation to town meeting. I think it's inappropriate for the select board minority appointed members plus one would be making a recommendation on the part of CTO&S. That's a double bite to me. We have a bit of overlap between advisory and CTO&S in the form of Harry Boers, and maybe that happens from time to time. Harry on a large committee, which is advisory, invariably abstains if CTO&S has not yet taken a matter up, right? I'm not going to go back to Article 10 and say, gee, maybe it should have addressed serving on CTO&S and the advisory committee. That's a whole different subject. And I think both committees are happy to have Harry Boers weighing in. I see the politicalization, the double bite, the overlap. It's not like the audit committee, which goes to an external face. It's representative of the select board, the school committee, and a member of the advisory committee, I suspect, as a proxy of town meeting. And then it becomes external facing. The same, I believe, is true at the state level, where you've got appointment of an independent agency, right? But CTO&S is not an independent agency. It's an advisory committee to town meeting. What else do they do?
Okay, thank you. Ian and then Harry Boers.
I guess my first question was whether there was anyone else, and maybe the answer is no, just by default. I mean, whether there's anyone else in the public who had a thought on this issue, because I think we've launched into subcommittee and committee members kind of expressing opinions, and at least I, for one, was particularly interested in hearing what the petitioners and any other members of the public had to say, at least on this issue first, before we go to the other issue. And so I guess I just wanted to kind of ask if there's any other views from the public or from the petitioners on this particular topic that haven't been aired yet.
I think the petitioners have aired it, but I agree with you that the public should be heard from.
Yeah, well, it's been an open public hearing this whole entire time, and they can raise their hand at any time.
Mine will lead to a question.
Marty's is already raised, but
And Marissa Vogt is
yep, she's after Harry. All right.
Okay. Well, I'll sort of, I guess, hold my opinions until I hear the answers to the questions and Marissa's thoughts, and Marty.
Harry, you were raised first. You want to go?
Sure. The conversation so far has been looking into the box of CTOS. And generally I've heard two themes. The one theme that CTOS falls under the legislative branch. It should have a certain level of independence, and to the extent that you can depoliticize it. I like to think for the most part that is true. And I'm thinking of some of the articles or the issues that it's taken up not that long ago, such as the HR board or civil service, which some might argue sort of came into conflict with the select board. So I understand people wanting to be protective of that as an institution and as a value to the discourse within town government. I do note that, one of the big things which we will be getting into in terms of a change that's being proposed is that there would be this regular review of the structure of municipal government, which is, I think, probably a pretty big task. I mean, you can do a job well or you can do it poorly, but I think it's a pretty big task. C2S does other things right now, which leads me to the question, is, did you consider bringing this forward to be a periodic created committee? This is done in other municipalities. And by the way, doing this sort of thing is not unusual. It is done in other places, say every 10 years. Different things are looked at. They're done in different ways, some more deeply than others. From what I've seen, they tend to take their time to go through it because it does take a fair amount of work. I know the petitioners have a concern with there being institutional knowledge or perhaps a propensity to be deliberative, and they want to preserve all of those things. But I can also imagine where you would have a committee that's created periodically to do this. I'm not suggesting it. This is just a for instance, and it can still have have CTOS. I don't know that you need everybody, but let's say you had 3 members of CTOS on it, as well as the chair of the select board, perhaps the chair of the school committee, advisory committee, moderator. All of these groups or all of these individuals are going to be looking at the issue of town governance from a slightly different perspective. And there's probably value in doing that and taking stock periodically. And in that case, you would separate this out of CTOS. CTOS would still be doing what it is doing. It evaluates things as they happen so that it can advise town meeting. And it also provides a mechanism for this periodic review that has input from more than just a small group, and people with experience, and hopefully with some balance. And I'm just wondering if that had been considered or if it had been excluded, and what the thoughts were of the petitioners.
Rebecca?
Thanks, Harry. A couple of things. One is CTO&S does not just report to town meeting and make recommendations to town meeting. CTO&S recommendations span our government structure. They can make recommendations. Frequently in the past, it's the select board that has asked CTO&S to look at an issue, and it's an issue that can be resolved by the select board using its executive authority to create another committee to look into something. Which, I mean, there are all sorts of authorities that come with the executive, and recommendations of CTO&S have frequently actually spoken to things that don't need town meetings action at all. So I just wanted to clarify that to say that CTO&S is just advisory to town meeting like the advisory committee is simply not the case.
No, it's not just advisory to town meeting, but it reports, town meeting on a regular basis as things.
No, absolutely. Its reports are public. It's reporting to the public. When it comes to town meeting, it is, I mean, sometimes it makes a report to town meeting because it has warrant articles that follow from that, or it asks to have some of its recommendations turned into warrant articles, the Town Administrators Act being a prime example of that. So did we consider creating a separate committee for this decennial review? No, because we had a standing committee that was already doing this kind of responsive review when there was a warrant article that came through, and because CTO&S was originally formed for ongoing review, not just responsive review to other people's proposals. And so in places that do appointed reviews for periodic, those are almost always places that have a charter, a home rule charter that was created since 1966, in which case they have a charter that requires a charter review committee. It's almost always either every 5 or 10 years. And it is by statute within their charters, it says that it will be appointed. But so the reason we didn't consider that is because we have a standing committee. And I read you Richard Leary's quote, which could not be clearer, that the advantage that Brookline has and the advantage that that the petitioners had in mind was that we actually have a standing committee with a great history of doing this work. It's just that we haven't done it for like 30 years in this particular way. We haven't, CTO&S has not done that deep dive, which has led to so many positive changes. And it feels like a good government practice would be to return to doing that. And if that, so that's the need to have, and why we didn't consider, given that we have CTO&S, we didn't consider going in a different direction.
Harry, you done?
Yeah, I would just quickly comment that it sort of presupposes that CTOS would be structured to do both things. And I just don't want us to be naive as to how big an undertaking a review would be every 10 years.
Okay, thank you. Marissa and then Kim.
Yeah, hi everyone. If anyone doesn't know me, I'm Marissa Vogt. I'm a town meeting member in Precinct 6. I'm also one of the co-petitioners. Um, I think uh some of the comments about the moderator's appointment process kind of struck me that it's the moderator's appointment process to AC and other committees that kind of pop up as a referral or something a like a kind of standalone thing is very different in that the standalone things that are recommended by town meeting, those have that high public visibility, and then the AC appointment process is to some extent dictated by our bylaws because we do have requirements on who should be on AC to the extent practicable. But I think CTO&S is a very different thing. And so I think it does make sense to have some requirement for a public transparent process, which would be provided by having the select board appoint some of those members. And to your point, David Mark, about, if it isn't broken, why tinker with it? Why try to fix it? I actually, I will be the less positive member of our group to say I do think that there is room for improvement in the current appointment process. I do think that in my time on town meeting, I have never once seen an open call or an announcement or anything from a moderator saying that they are appointing members to CTO&S, and if anyone's interested, they can apply. I don't recall seeing that. I think it's not as visible. I think it's hard to give a moderator those resources to get their message out if they do want to make that that more public call, because the select board just naturally has more visibility. And I would really like more visibility in that process. And also, I would like to have a committee that more fully represents the diversity of identities of people in our town, but also the experiences. And I think there's lots of great people out there who could also bring things to CTO&S. And I have another AC meeting that I have to be at pretty soon, so I might not be able to join you for the rest of the meeting. I might jump off soon, but if I do,
Do you want to make any comment
have a
on the
good
other
evening.
part that we haven't gotten to yet?
I'm a co-petitioner. I love all of the ideas that my fellow co-petitioners have come up with. I think it's a great article. So
Okay.
yeah.
Interesting point. Thank you, Marissa. Kim.
Oh, hi.
Hi.
For what it's worth, in my opinion, assigning the responsibility to a standing committee, specifically CTOS, seems very practical and sustainable. And it can build institutional knowledge, as Harry referred to, provide continuity, take a more consistent long-term view of these questions. And to me, it's preferable than relying on an ad hoc committee. The standing committee doesn't have to wait to be constituted by the select board or the moderator, and can hit the ground running and not have to start from scratch each time. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Kim. Neil, you had a two finger. You want to jump in on a point?
Yeah, I'm going to expand my two finger a little bit because there have been some comments since. So that the select board occasionally seeks advice from CTO&S seems to me underscores the notion that CTO&S needs to be independent of the select board. Otherwise, they're appointing the people that they're then seeking advice and making political appointments in order to get the advice that you might desire. Doesn't make much sense to me. To Harry Bohr's point, CTOS will do what it does, for 10 years, and then it'll have this other assignment. And I think it creates a sort of dilemma for the moderator and the appointing authority early on. Do you not consider the skill set needed to undertake a review or interpret the results that come from a consultant if it's a consulting firm route? And then as you get closer to, do you start thinking we need a skill set for that at the, while shortcoming the notion that we still have town meeting, we still have warrant articles, we still have CTS, CTO&S weighing in there. Lastly, to the notion of institutional knowledge. Institutional knowledge doesn't exist in CTO&S or the advisory committee. It only exists in the members individually. And whatever appointing authority would be appointing an ad hoc committee, could appoint people from CTO&S, they could appoint members of the select board, they could appoint members of the advisory committee, at large and otherwise, town meeting members, members of the public. You can get, experience, you can get former select board members. The institutional history that may or may not exist from time to time on any one committee, I think is more likely to be created and captured in an ad hoc committee. And, perhaps that's something that for once every 10 years ought to be considered. We're starting to sort of drift away from the sort of, part A into part, A and B, which is, fine, we'll keep going.
Okay, that was a bit more than a two-finger, Neil.
Well, as I said, when you let me listen to more comments, you get more, two fingers.
Okay, Janice and then Marty. You're muted.
So, yes, I know. So, yes, so Harry Boers actually led us to this now second part, I feel. So the comment I was going to say before, I'll say now, and also, so, while Marissa's here. So, in looking at the materials that was put onto the site in preparation for this meeting, was a look at what other communities are doing. And some of them, one of the tasks that was mentioned in this warrant article is reviewing of bylaws. Well, we have had a bylaw review committee in this town, which, to Harry's point, was a separate specialized committee. It met for a long time, as I recall. I don't even remember how many years it was in effect, but it certainly was. It did a deep dive, and it was a lot of work by the committee members, which was a very diverse group. To Marissa's point, I agree with Marissa that that the kind of work that's being described in this warrant article would be better off in a broader committee. So we're in agreement to that. Where I disagree is that this burden should be put on CTO&S. Despite Kim's excellent comments as well, in favor of why CTO&S is a logical committee to put it on. It is a lot of work, and I'm inclined to think that it's really overburdening a committee that does really well in its framework right now, in the scope of work that it does right now. So there we are, bridging.
Okay, Marty?
Yeah, a couple of things came up that I want to respond to very quickly. One was a word that David Mark used, that the word partisan. And I talked twice about politics not being a dirty word, and we're all involved with politics, and that's a good thing, but too much politics is a bad thing. And the word partisan rang to me because I've lived through two periods, and at least Gene Berg, who's the most unappreciated public official in Brookline, and we all have to acknowledge that. At least she remembers this, and maybe Dick and Carl, and maybe nobody else. Maybe, I don't know, Janice. Anyway, the point is, I've lived through two periods of what I call hyper partisanship. One was rent control, and then 35 years later, some of the police and race issues. And rent control was different because it was pretty much a binary issue. I think there's a word called Manichean that you either for it or against it. But the stuff a few years ago on race and police was much more complicated and should not have been that partisan an issue. And that's what fears me about making these appointments more political than they are. And I think I commend Kate for the members that she's appointed to this committee. And I was on this committee for about 20 years, and I might still be on it if not for things that were out of my control. And I think it's as good a committee as there is in town, and to have it, I won't use the word infected, but impacted by more political appointers, I think is a mistake. So that's it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Marty. So that's nobody else has their hand up at the moment. Jocelyn.
Thanks very much, David Mark. So where do I start? First of all, it's hard to do the minutes. And also, try to, assimilate everything that's being said. I agree with everyone who has said this committee is an extraordinary, I think gold medal, did someone say gold ribbon committee? And it's why I was particularly glad that the CTO&S took up Articles 10 and 11 from the special town meeting regarding the advisory committee members serving on other committees, because I knew that it would be a fair and thorough analysis. So I'm aligning myself with the view that it is critical to maintain separation between this committee and the executive. And I think there's something to be said. I've forgotten who said this. It might have been one of the speakers pointed out that in our bylaws, there is a separation between the legislative and the executive bodies. And of course, under the legislative part in the bylaws is town meeting, the advisory committee, CTO&S, the moderator. And then when you look at the executive body, goodness, they have so much appointing authority. I don't want to waste time by reading all of the boards and commissions that the select board appoints to. But I also want to comment on the town administrator's authority, because over the years it has grown and grown. And those of you who are familiar with the Town Administrator Act know that the town administrator makes a lot of very, very important recommendations to the select board. And the select board, of course, appoints the town administrator authority, and it's rare that the select board wants to criticize or criticize the town administrator's opinions. And there's one example of a change in government structure that happened pretty recently that really, in my view, really calls for a committee that's separate from the executive to make a decision. And that was the establishment of the sustainability division. Many of you don't know that there is special legislation that governs the composition of the Department of Public Works, Chapter 32 of the Acts of 1981 or something like that. And so when the town administrator recommended this division to be created in the town, it was perfect. It was perfect material for CTO&S. But I don't believe that it was ever forwarded to CTO&S, and the town administrator went ahead with the select board approval and established a division. If you look at our bylaws, it is quite clear in the bylaw referring to the Department of Public Works that Article 3.17.1 establishes the Department of Public Works and the 5 divisions within the Department of Public Works. Now, if the CTO&S were largely or to some extent appointed by the select board, there's no independent body to review that decision. And so I think it's a mistake to enlarge the appointing authority of the select board in this area, which is really intended to be under the legislative branch. And I do have a question. Did anyone look into the legislative history of Article 2.3 to determine what the thinking was in town meeting when the bylaw was adopted regarding CTO&S. Thank you.
Yes, we had an extensive conversation about that, and it was in the materials that I submitted. I can't remember whether all of you saw it, but there was an ad hoc committee in 1958 established because there had been a warrant article before town meeting in 1958 that recommended the adoption of a town manager. That was referred for study. There was a moderators committee created, an ad hoc committee to study the question of the town manager for Brookline. And that is the committee that did the study that resulted in two different things. Three different things. One, they said we don't need a town manager. Two, they had four different recommendations for shifting the process of budget development with significantly more input from the executive secretary, which was the beginning of the creation of the authority of the executive secretary that then turned into the authority of the town administrator many, many decades later. And the third thing they recommended was a standing committee, CTO&S, to do the kind of work they had just done for ongoing scrutiny of our structure and organization to continue that work.
Thanks, Rebecca. And distinctly under the legislative branch in the town bylaws. My apologies. You started in 1968 in my notes this evening, so.
Yeah, it was actually, the study was 58, the CTO&S bylaw was 59.
So my comment is that I align with those who have said they believe that the appointing authority should be under the moderator's watch. Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to point out that we've lost a couple people. Alec and Kelly and town council had to go to other meetings, other AC meetings. Surprised that they would, leave us, but okay. So we're now sort of on the second part of it now. Lisa? You raised your hand?
I'm still struggling with the first part because I would like to figure out what structure will give us the best recommendations. And
After this, I'm sorry, as the sort of person in CTOS who is also in charge of this, it's been an hour and a half. I would like it if we could move on from the first part to what I see as the meatier one. So after Elisa's comment, I suggest we move on.
We sort of are in the process of doing that, so.
I think Elisa's, okay.
Yeah.
Good.
I'm just going to say I'm still struggling with what is going to give us the best recommendations, and I see benefits to having the select board, which is the one that is dealing on a daily basis with how they're interacting with their world, can see faults and ways that perhaps what's done can be improved upon, versus the ability of the moderator to be able to appoint based on experience and not just getting people to apply for the position and then make a decision among that group of people. And I still haven't heard how I'm still struggling with that. So I'm just gonna I'll let us move on, but it's still a struggle I'm having.
Ian? You're muted, Ian.
Thank you. Despite agreeing passionately with Kate that we should move on, I'm going to still talk about this for one more second. I think one comment, one concept that hasn't been mentioned, I think I ultimately don't think this question matters all that much. But I think one major difference between how the select board appoints people and how the moderator appoints people is that the select board appointments are limited to those people who apply, and the moderator's appointments include people who apply and also people they seek out. And so I just think
that's
that
what I was saying, right?
Yeah, that gives you a potential mean, assuming you trust the moderator, which I do, I mean, I think it just gives you a broader range of people to serve on the committee, because it allows the moderator to just sort of ask people, who around town might be good at this and who's not otherwise involved in town politics that may be interested in it. And that's my sense is you get a broader pool if you have the moderator doing it than the select board.
Okay. So now we're sort of moving straight into the periodic review of government part. So people who have comments on that.
So one more on this point. One more, and I apologize to Kate in particular, but I listened to this and I listened to this as if, oh my goodness, the select board has no voice. They just don't have an opinion or a way of expressing it, which is completely ridiculous, right? They meet on TV, right? Every Tuesday evening. Anything they propose, they can propose at their meeting. They can come to the advisory committee and explain their warrant article for why they want to do it. And they can come to CTO&S and explain why they want to do it. And if they don't need the consent of town meeting, if it's something that they can do themselves, change the charge of a select board appointed committee created by the select board, a select board established committee. They don't need permission from anybody, right? I just don't see why we pretend that the only way to get the input from the select board is to give them a minority appointment vote on CTO&S. By the way, they get to come to the meetings. The only difference is their appointees will get to vote.
All right, so on the second part, the review of government, who wants to comment? Really? Okay.
You're just looking for any comment? I'll be happy to comment, sure.
Okay.
I think this is the meat of it, really. Looking at the structure of municipal government on a regular basis, a regular recurring basis. So CTOS doesn't look at it the way I think it's envisioned here. It takes up things as they come, changes that are proposed, and how they may or may not affect the structure of government. This would be something a bit different. As I said before, there are other municipalities that do this. It's not uncommon. May not be most municipalities, but it's not uncommon, even if the only reason they're doing it is because it's required in their charter that they review it and they do it, and they only do a superficial job. That's kind of on them. But it gets into a more fundamental issue of, is there value in doing this on occasion? It seems to me when we say to review the organization and structure of municipal government, it can be fairly interpretive. At our last CTOS meeting, the word comprehensive review was used several times. And I guess sort of one question I have is, to what extent would this be a review of things operational or structural or both? I'm assuming both, which gets back to my earlier comment that I think this would be fairly big undertaking. I think if you're going to do it, it deserves it. It's a fairly big undertaking and you take time with it. But it seems not unreasonable to occasionally take stock in how you're doing things. Understanding if the things you're doing are serving you the way that you want to serve them. That's not to say that you do the review in order to come up with a scorecard, but perhaps as a way to come up with a report card so that we can understand, oh, based on this information, do we then want to start considering changes to whatever it may be? Which we kind of do now in different things through different committees, whether it's bylaws, whether it's revenue and expenditure, whether it's FPAC, I mean, any of those sort of things. But this would be a little bit more holistic. So there may be ways of doing this. But I'd like to have a sense what other people think in terms of how deep they think it should be, how comprehensive it should be. And of course, it rolls back to our earlier conversation of if you're going to do it, you want people who have had some experience, who understand the machinations of our town government, but also maybe viewing it from different perspectives and how it works best sort of in their arena. When everybody's at the table. So
thank you. Dick? You're muted, Dick.
We are actually getting to the central question, and that is, what is meant by looking at the organization and structure of town government? I looked at the Collins Center report. The Collins Center was cited by the proponents as an example of what could happen. And I think the figure of $15,000 to $30,000 was put on aid from the Collins Center. There were two Collins Center publications on their websites that seemed to look at organization and structure, and they did it in a very narrow fashion. A report for Fitchburg looked at IT, law, and purchasing, and a report for Marion looked at DPW. Is that what we're looking for here? If we're just looking at that sort of narrow reporting, it doesn't seem to encompass what is being envisioned here. And if that's what you get for $15,000 or $25,000 or $30,000, if you're going to be looking at the town structure generally, you're probably talking $500,000 or more to look at the structure of committees in the town, to look at the structure of departments in the town, to look at the structure of divisions in the town. Should there be more? Should some be deleted? Should there be an external committee that looks at the schools and how the schools are structured, since they are the vast majority of the town's budget every year? It's I think very easy to say we want to look at organization and structure, but I think before we go further with this, we really have to define what is meant by that. The couple of reports that were cited early on in this, there was a 1968 report, I think, which basically looked at the relationship between the executive secretary and the select board and administrative burdens. And it talked about things like routine licenses, hiring and firing, disciplinary proceedings, dealing with requests and letters from citizen groups, and said that the select board really shouldn't be doing things like that, that they should be looking at major policy problems, and listed major policy issues like parking in the town, the elderly, juveniles and public safety, the CIP, and coordination of social services. There is simply a broad range of what organization and structure could encompass, and I think we cannot talk around that issue. We can't just say CTO&S or anybody should be looking at something in this area every 10 years. Is it narrow? Is it organizational? Is it broad? Are we looking at structure generally? Are we looking at the town? Are we looking at the schools? We've got to, I think, tackle that issue here.
Okay, thank you. I would assume that since it's not specifically detailed, that it would be up to CTO&S to decide that.
Well, the question is, what is the expectation for what CTO&S would do. I mean, I'd be, you know, you could say, okay, let's look at DPW. Would CTO&S be discharging its expectation under this bylaw if it did that?
No, no. It
Yeah.
says periodic review of the organization structure of municipal government. And I think it's pretty clear that it's not saying, let's look at a portion of municipal government. It's, let's look at our governmental structure. And I think one advantage to having a committee do it that's already working in that area is that hopefully they will have generated thoughts already about what seems to be working on a global level and what doesn't. And so I don't know why we would have to expand that.
The focus is, to this point, certainly have been on things like largely in both in 68 and 95, the relationship between the select board and the town administrator, between the select board and the executive secretary. I don't think, and I gather from what Rebecca said on committee structures under town meeting, it doesn't seem that anything has really delved into the structure of departments and the delivery of services on the town and the school side. And that would be a completely different undertaking. And is that being contemplated here?
Okay, I'm going to call on Kate first, who hasn't spoken much, then Ian, then Marty.
So my view is that a review is reasonable. A comprehensive review is one that would take years. I'm trying to find the town that Harry cited, which eventually reviewing the structure, and a committee was appointed, and it took 3 years to do this overhaul review, because it is not just a sort of slapdash review if you're reviewing all of the structure and organization of the town. So I do not believe that a standing committee, CTO&S or any other, is the one to do this. I do not believe it is CTOS's current purpose to do this. I think that it is not in CTOS's ability to do this. I think that is even acknowledged by the fact that CTOS would be given leeway to hire a consultant, because a 7-person body made up of, let's say, who we are now, would not have the necessary qualifications to do a comprehensive review. So hiring a consultant would be expensive. Other committees or towns have formed committees on an ad hoc basis, and we discussed at the CTO&S meeting what sorts of people would be on a committee. Usually there are 9 people, I believe I said. You know, representatives, you know, select board, moderator, department heads would be interviewed, but representatives of various parts of town if you weren't going to hire a consultant. And it would take about 12 to 18 months, something like that. And the range would be up to $75,000 at least, because it would depend on the scope. And what could be decided when these were being formed is what actually should be reviewed. And it could come on based on what is going on in the town. So if every 10 years the town decides it does want to have an overview, okay, are we really doing things right? like it did last year, 2 years ago, there was a moderators committee created to review all the forms of municipal government available in Massachusetts to the town of Brookline. And the hope was that a singular recommendation would be made, if possible, as to what changes were possible to possibly improve it. The committee was not capable of coming to a unified solution, which was not satisfying to many people. But that does not mean that there should be a standing committee whose charge is to do it better, to do a better job of doing this. I think that the correct answer is to have one created, as many towns do, at the will of town meeting. When the town decides it wants this review every 10 years, then do that, but also allow it the leeway to focus on, okay, the schools are screwed up. We really need to look at that. The finance department, something's going on, something like that. Or we have too many committees. What the heck's going on there? Look at that. But the town needs the flexibility to review and decide what needs to be looked at the scope, to see what its finances are at the time, rather than committing to spending $75,000, $100,000 looking in the future to do a comprehensive review of what should be done. And basically, to some degree, if you're going to hire a consultant to do the work anyway, it shows that the composition of the committee who is appointed to the CTO&S doesn't really matter. It's sort of acknowledging they can't do it anyway because they're not qualified. So I think that sort of encasing what's putting it in stone, that it has to be CTO&S, that it has to be every 10 years, that it has to be done this way. Eliminates the flexibility that the town really needs, and that what would really serve the town's purpose is to have the flexibility to appoint committee as needed. And whether there is something that could, whether it's a resolution or something else saying that it's recommended that the town do this, that be done. But that this article, as well-minded as it is, because I think we can all agree that some sort of review of aspects of the town can always need some sort of review. It's just not the way to go about achieving what needs to be done here. So that's what I have to say.
Thank you, Kate. Ian?
Yeah, I mean, I agree largely with a lot of the things that have been said, and I kind of want to go back to maybe some of what Dick had said earlier. And I agree with Kate. I agree with Kate's last point that it's hard to disagree that there isn't value to a periodic review of aspects of our town's organization and structure. And Kate, in your comments, and I think this kind of illustrates a point I want to make. You inserted the word comprehensive in before the word review. That word doesn't exist in the warrant article as drafted. It just says a review. I know the petitioners made a point of saying that the warrant article doesn't speak to the form of government, but it doesn't say that in the language either. And it seems reasonable to me that someone could interpret the phrase organization and structure to include form, or maybe they don't. I don't know. And David, Mark, you made the point, of course, it would be in CTO&S's discretion to determine the scope of the review, but I'm not sure that's true either. I mean, under the current language, it says that CTO&S may conduct a review. Under the proposed language, it's a directive. It says that CTO&S shall conduct a review. So it doesn't say that CTO&S shall conduct a review of some of, or portions of. It says a review of the organization and structure of the town. So I just think there's a lot of vagueness in what CTO&S would be directed, required, mandated to do under this article, that would leave us or whoever's on the committee, would leave us with I think really a serious challenge about how, if this were to be adopted, how would we actually go about doing this? And I think, to Dick's point, we've looked at several issues that are, that may seem over the years, it may seem narrow, but are not. So, just to take an example, we've been doing a review of the Town Administrator Act, and I think one of the things we've learned in the course of doing the Town Administrator Act and reviewing the scope of the town administrator's role is that much of the scope of the town administrator's role comes down to decisions over his authority on hiring and firing. Right? I probably would not have thought of that early on. I think we've had discussions about the town budgeting process and sort of how that works through, who develops the budget and where does it go and in what order. I mean, that's a narrow question, a very fundamental question to the town's organization and structure. I think the question that the moderators committee dealt with over the form of government, that's a big question, but it's a specific question, right? And so in some ways that's easier to handle, right? That's a specific question. Should we be a city or should we be a town? That's a specific question that's much more directed than the organization and structure of the town. So I think there's a lot of value in the periodic review. I'm really struggling with the language of this, and it's probably fixable. Maybe it's fixable by saying something like shall conduct a review and that CTO&S has the authority to determine the scope of the review. I mean, maybe that's one way to do it explicitly. But and the other thing I would say is, I do like the fact that it gives the option, the authority to hire someone to assist doing it. I do think it seems incredibly unlikely to me. I mean, certainly in this year, if we were to have to do it this year, there's no way we could spend town money given the override and all of the budgeting to hire a consultant to do that. That seems completely implausible. In 2018, is the situation going to be better? I mean, 2028, maybe, but maybe not. And maybe in 2028, we'll also be in a situation where it's really going to fall on the members of the committee to do the work, because it's just implausible to spend significant amount of money to hire a consultant to do something like this. So, so those are my thoughts. The one other thing I will add, which is the most minor of comments, but the insertion of the and or proposed, I don't think the petitioners really mean and or, because as written, you could comply with this warrant article by not conducting any review at all and simply proposing action. And I don't think that that's what's intended by it. I think what's probably intended is and propose action as they deem appropriate or something like that. But so I don't know. I mean, I like the concept behind this proposal. I just find it really challenging from the perspective of someone who may be asked to implement it, to figure out how the heck to do that.
Thank you. My comment, Ian, just for what was more along the lines of CTO&S would have the ability to determine the depth of their study, how deep to do the dive. And maybe I should have been more clear on that. And while we haven't had a large in-depth study in a long time, we do have small studies almost constantly. We have 263 town meeting members who can bring in warrants to change bylaws and to change other things. We used to elect the treasurer. Now it's appointed. We had the BFAC report. After Prop 2.5 came in with all the budget cuts, the town had to figure out how to do more with less and become more efficient. So there is a constant small examination of town government happening all the time, just not a big overall one. And I'm not sure what the overall one would do that all these small ones don't. Alec, who had to leave the meeting, he has a lot of warrant articles to change things. Neil Gordon is well known for changing the bylaws to improve them. So little things are being done, but I'm debating whether having that is more efficient than having an overall thing, because when you want to change any part of the town government, you put in a warrant article and that can happen immediately and you don't have to wait the 10 years. I don't know. Marty, you've been very patient. Thank you.
Never been called patient before, but thank you. I've been
It's
called
on the recording now.
slow, but not necessarily patient. So I'm just going to add a little bit on what just been talked about, and then I'll get to the three main points I wanted to make at the beginning beforehand. On this issue, I'm sorry, recovering again from a little throat issue. It seems to me it's clear that the article is talking about a large comprehensive review, not isolated issues. For instance, the language to modify and change the organization and structure. I mean, that's the language that comes from CTO&S. And that's a large issue. It's not individual issues. And then it goes on to say, including operating departments and committees. It doesn't say including one or more operating departments or committees. I mean, and I think that's what the petitioners have in mind. I mean, some of them wanted to make it a city. So I don't have any doubt that if this got passed, that CTO&S should be running a comprehensive review. And so that gets me into what I originally wanted to talk about, which is how do you review town government? And I spent a lot of time, as some of you know, being a pest to the moderators committee last year and complaining about what they did. And some of them were upset with me, and that's part of my life for 50 years is sometimes people get upset with me. But the point is this: in the course of doing that, I had a lot of, and by the way, David Mark just said, there hasn't been a comprehensive review. I think that committee tried to do one. It tried to look at our form of government. I just think they failed because of what I'm about to say, which is that, and the word that struck me that I want to focus on is when we got a statement from Mike Dukakis, one sentence I'm going to repeat to you. While I long wondered if a city would be better, I now see zero evidence supporting that. And that word evidence is what I want to talk about a little bit. I don't think that committee really focused on evidence. And I said that publicly. We said it in about 100-word warrant article with attachments. I think it really came down to individual members' opinions. And I think on this issue, it's very hard to come up with evidence that is metric-based or measurable evidence of how good is Brookline's government. And the study that nobody seems to be remembering, maybe, I haven't heard any mention of the League of Women Voters study in, I think it's 1988 or 9. And if it's 88, I was still on the board. Anyway, the point is, their study was a very detailed study. I forget how many pages, like 10, 15, 20 pages, single spaced. And the main thing that they ended up focusing on was when they did a real survey of town residents, people were happy with the form of government. And as I viewed the moderator's report, the charter study committee last year, it seemed to me, especially until the very end, when there was a good report by Sandy Gatsby, co-signed by David Mark, it was all individual opinions and biases. And I don't remember much of any evidence, even in the good report by Sandy and David Mark. I mean, that was basically your opinions, which I shared. And it didn't mention the select board, but that's a separate issue. So the scope of this committee, it seems to me, is really not a useful prediction that I can see that it's going to come up with anything really helpful. And so that gets me to the second point in terms of cost benefit analysis. What is the cost? The cost is going to be either enormous extra work for CTOS members and maybe an expense by farming it out. But even if it's farmed out, it seems to me CTOS is going to have responsibility to monitor it and shape it and sift it through and come up with recommendations. I don't think that a farmed out study by Collins, or I forget who they used in the league thing. I think it was something from UMass they used that did their survey. I think CTOS will have responsibility. So that gets me to the point of what is the harm of this? Well, one harm is imposing on the fabulous, with the exclusion of some former members, CTOS members over the years, that I don't think we should be imposing on them. And I note the irony that one reason that many people, including some in this meeting, opposed extending the work of the moderators committee with anyone else who wanted to get appointed and losing the people that were sick of the job, that would deter and chill people from being on committees in the future. And I certainly think, and CTOS, I hope, would think about this. If this were added to their responsibilities in 3 years, would they really want to be part of that? And how would it work in terms of recruiting people to be CTOS, to CTOS in the future? It seems to me that chilling argument is much more pertinent to the finding people for CTOS than it was to the amorphous question that was raised a year ago. If we extend the work of the committee with new members, doesn't that deter and chill people from volunteering to be on committees later? I thought that was a polite word would be a lot of hooey, but anyway, it seems to me that's a legitimate question for CTOS. And that gets me my last point, which is that for that reason, I hope that CTOS will weigh in on this and not feel that they have to think that it's some kind of conflict of interest because it could affect them in the future. I think that they are the best people to speak about how they think it would impact CTOS. And I hope that they won't think about saying we better not weigh in on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Marty. Just for the record, the Moderators Committee spent no time examining the current form of Brookline's government. We did not even have a meeting. Janice, and then Neil.
So thank you. So Marty's comments, many of you know I spent many years on the board of the League of Women Voters of Brookline. So Marty reminds me, yes. So the League actually does studies, and they do detailed studies, and they come to consensus. And one was the study that led to the executive secretary becoming a town manager. It was determined that the workload and the kind of work that they would do, that the executive secretary was doing, far exceeded that role as it was constructed, and so it was it was highly recommended. Another one that actually I worked on, which is kind of funny, which goes back to the politics of this. So I worked on one that was about whether the select board should give up their licensing function to a separate board. And I spent hours, hundreds of hours, looking at tapes of select board meetings and counting how many minutes were spent on doing these licensing meetings. And the select board at the time, we presented our findings. It was all very, we had data, we presented it, but the board at the time loved the social aspect of meeting with business people, meaning, and they did not want to give it up. But fast forward to today, and there's now a separate licensing committee, the select, right? So that goes to sort of the political calculus here, that, that the select board is a political body, and and it will change according to who's elected onto the select board. The CTO&S, in my experience of looking at it, tends to take a more measured view of things, a broader view, and not so much of a political perspective on things, which I think is valuable. But David Mark said something that also is very valuable to my thinking, which is that every time we have a town meeting, we pass legislation that changes our bylaws, our general bylaws, our zoning bylaws, and and we it has been valuable to have CTO&S be able to focus on those individual articles and add value to the conversation. Um, I'm not sure that a broad view of the functioning of town government really is using this body in the most effective way. And so I have real concerns with changing its focus, or at least the interpretation of its focus, by passing this kind of a warrant article. I do absolutely see value in periodic review, but and maybe a holistic periodic review is something we should think about. But again, right now I'm on the comprehensive plan steering committee, which I should be at instead of here at the moment. There's a meeting there now. And that's looking also holistically at the town and the way we approach certain things. We, as I said, there was the zoning bylaw committee, which met for a very long time looking at our zoning bylaws. And maybe, the way we're approaching things is working better than we imagine. Rebecca, I take your point that there's always room for improvement and for looking at things differently. And there is definitely value in having this conversation. I'm not sure that I will end up in my thinking is with this approach of this warrant article. But I think the conversation should continue. And I think that that all of you have done some good thinking about what would be of value to Brookline. And I'm going to end there. Thank you.
Thank you. It's 8 o'clock right now. We can close the public hearing, but I do want to give the two members of the public who haven't spoken, Carla Benka and Jonathan Golden, a chance. If you'd like to make comments, now's the time.
Can I follow
And
Janice?
then you absolutely, it's because it's 8 o'clock, I just want to give those two people a chance to comment. Any comment, Carla or Jonathan?
No, thank you, David Mark. No comment.
All right, and Jonathan's staying muted, so I'm guessing he does not have a comment either. So we'll close the public hearing part of this. Public safety can then go ahead and start deliberating as to whether we want to
Okay, I want to expand a little bit.
Yeah, I'm
thank
gonna, you can go ahead, and I just want to let CTO&S know that you're more than welcome to stay with the rest of us and listen to us and see where we end up. But if you want to close your part of the public hearing and get off, it's certainly understandable if you want to do that. It's been 2 hours. So Neil.
Yes, thank you. I want to expand a little bit on Janice Kahn's comment, and that's on the question of periodic review of the town's organization and structure. So if there's a perceived need for change, or even a perceived need to consider a change, that doesn't adhere to a timeline. It's something that can be initiated at any time. It can be initiated by CTO&S under the current bylaw, by the select board, by town meeting, or by the public. The suggestion that we need a timely review that can be made at any time. And we routinely see individual bylaws or amendments to existing bylaws, as Janice noted, offered by town meeting members or by the public. And, a short list include some of these proposals, most of them approved. In no particular order as I went through the bylaws. Non-citizen membership on appointed town bodies, the bylaw that I brought. Designation of the select board as police and fire commissioners. Adding a payroll division to the finance department. The proposed elimination of the HR board. Changing the composition of the naming committee. I suggest that the consultant would never come up with changing the composition of the naming committee. We added a member of the diversity commission. That's sort of in the weeds, but how many of those would be raised in a periodic review every 10 years by CTO&S? And how many would be raised in a periodic review by a consultant that's a comprehensive review? And how many wouldn't be raised by citizen petitioners because, quote, that's CTO&S's job? And how many would be rejected by town meeting because, quote, CTO&S is going to do a review next year or whatever? And how would town meeting properly vet all at once, right, the recommendations that will come out of CTO&S or some similar committee or consultant, right, with a barrage of recommendations for changes to the bylaw? I know how we do that now on a piecemeal, every once in a while basis. It's a warrant article or two or three, and we take it through the process. I would suggest that a comprehensive change, a comprehensive review couldn't be properly vetted through the structure that we have now, which I think is a pretty good structure of vetting recommendations of CTO&S and the select board and the advisory committee and deliberation by town meeting. I'm not sure how you get there. I don't think that a set timetable is the necessary action, and that if there really is a need, as I said, or a perceived need for review, ask for it, and in fact, a majority vote of town meeting can mandate it and fund it.
David Mark,
Yes,
can you give me 3 or 4 minutes so I can conclude the CTO&S meeting? We can't
absolutely.
get back.
Absolutely. And then we're going to give Rebecca a chance to respond to everything she's heard tonight.
Yeah, there's no way we can get back into our meeting. To the members of the CTO&S, can you meet on the 13th, which is 2 weeks from tonight? Ian?
Yes.
Kate?
I can't.
Okay, Kate?
I can.
Ian, when can you meet?
I can meet on, are we looking at that week? I can meet on the 15th.
Is that a Tuesday?
It's a Wednesday.
Okay, Harry?
I will be in Mexico that week.
Oh.
Sorry.
When are you leaving?
I am leaving on the morning of the 8th.
Thanks a lot, Harry. When are you coming back, Harry?
I'm coming back on the evening of the 19th.
Ian?
I could do, if we're looking at that week, I could do
19th?
So that would be Monday the 20th. I could do Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday that week.
Isn't Monday a holiday?
What's the date?
What
Oh,
holiday?
is that Patriots Day?
Oh, it's Patriots Day.
And Tuesday is the advisory committee.
So wait, okay. Is town hall closed on Patriots Day? Yeah, I guess probably so.
Well, I don't know whether we can legally meet on a public
Yeah,
holiday.
that's what I was getting at. Yeah, okay.
And I'm not sure if we want to, we'll all be watching or running the marathon, right?
I'll be so tired from running.
All
To get
the
up
way
to
from Mexico, Harry?
Beacon Street to watch them go by, not in the marathon.
All right, Ian, give me the
How about the
Wednesday date.
21st?
The
The-
21st. Harry,
Well, that's
21st.
Tuesday. That's a Tuesday.
No, I want Wednesday.
I can't do that Wednesday. I could, no, I can't do that Wednesday.
What if we do 5 o'clock Tuesday? Harry, that would work for you, wouldn't it?
I'll make it happen.
Yeah. Can you do 5 o'clock, Ian?
Yes.
All right, Dick?
That's fine. That's fine.
Kate?
Yeah.
Sean?
Yes.
Thank you. 5 o'clock Tuesday, whatever the date is.
21st.
All right, you'll remind me. Thanks for getting me in, Ian. All right, thank you one and all.
Are we
This is-
adjourning our public hearing also?
We are adjourning our public hearing and our meeting.
Thank
so
you.
that they can deliberate. We can't get into another meeting now.
Correct.
All right. So thank you one and all, CTO&S, and thank you very much, David Mark, and your committee.
Well, thank you. It's been a really interesting meeting.
And we will stay, those of us like me who would like to stay and listen to you will stay.
David and Mark, you've been a wonderful host, though I think the food and drink have been lacking.
Yes,
Well,
yes,
we
a
have
little hors d'oeuvre. All
Yeah,
right,
Carla did not deliver on the pizza, so.
This concludes, all right, all in favor, CTO&S?
I.
Dick?
I.
Okay.
Adjourn. Aye.
All right.
Aye.
We CTO&S is adjourned.
Okay, so now as we have a tradition in the advisory committee, we'd like to give the main petitioner a chance to respond to anything or everything that she would like to. Rebecca, the floor is yours.
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that.
Okay, then we'll adjourn.
I really appreciate I really appreciate those who like me have looked at this warrant article and not seen the complexity that a lot of the folks who have spoken seem to be reading into it. There are a couple of things that got said that I just want to correct. There was a reference to this being similar to a bylaw review. Nothing about the language in CTO&S's existing article and nothing in the article that we're proposing is about a bylaw review. That is a separate issue. It is done separately. It's done for separate reasons. That's not what this is. Yes, we have other committees that have looked at zoning. We have other committees that have looked at, that do long-term planning on housing. We have other committees that do that. And we have CTO&S that looks at structure and operation of government. And that's what it would continue to do. Again, there seems to be some implication in what I've been hearing from some of you that this changes that. All of the language about what CTO&S does exists now and will continue to exist verbatim. We've changed none of that except to add a /or, and Ian, I'll take another look at that. But I think the /or was added to already, to me, confusing language in the bylaw that talks about making recommendations and then makes another reference to making recommendations. And I think we were putting in the /or because it is possible to come out of a review like this and say, we took a hard look. We took a hard look at executive efficiency and the distribution of authorities for making decisions. We took a look at town meeting. We took a look at the preparation of town meeting members to consider the level and degree of articles that they're looking at. We took a look at any number of issues that have come up over the 10 years between these studies. We took a look at them and nothing has so changed that we feel like there needs to be a structural response to what has changed. There may have been other responses as they happened, but so this is this is an opportunity to reflect on changes that have come up in between, but it doesn't eliminate anything that CTO&S already does. It's not taking the place of CTO&S's ongoing, annual agenda that it sets and that is sometimes responsive to warrant articles and is sometimes generated by its own interests, like in the Town Administrators Act. So, so this is simply layering on. I think somebody made reference to, the language about departments and, reviewing, including the review of departments and committees. That's because that's in CTO&S's existing bylaw. We did not touch that language. And so if there is confusion about what it means to do that, I guess my question, and this would be more to CTO&S, but something for you all to consider, is why are the people who are currently serving on CTO&S not really confused by what it is their bylaw asks them to do? Because they seem to be very comfortable with that first piece about reviewing things that come to them, reviewing, proposals that come before town meeting that consider changes in the structure, and they get thrown to CTO&S either before or after they've been dealt with by town meeting, sometimes both. But that whole second part of the existing bylaw seems to be confusing about what it means. And it's there. We're just saying, and it's, it seems to the petitioners were looking at that and saying, it's been 30 years since they took the bylaw up on that opportunity to do a review of structure and government and make recommendations about changes. So maybe, since it is considered good, if not best practice for healthy government, to do this on a periodic basis, maybe we should say, okay, CTO&S, that second part, it's no longer up to you whether you do it every 10 years, which doesn't seem like an onerous thing, especially if you can hire the staff support you would need by hiring a consultant. And again, I don't think the assumption should be made that what hiring a consultant means is throwing this to someone else to accomplish by themselves. The idea behind hiring a consultant was to assuage the town administrator who said, how are we possibly going to staff this? And the answer is you hire a consultant who staffs that project. And finally, although I'm sure there are other things. So finally, everybody's talking about this, with the timing that's outlined in the warrant article, gives essentially 19 months for these periodic reviews to be done. That is the same amount of time that the 68 review took. That's the same amount of, actually the 68 review, took about 19 months. It's the same amount of time that CTO&S has in the past devoted to studies that it has not had consulting help on. They did, in fact, do those studies. Most of the people on this call right now have been on committees that did really long-term, really in-depth studies of things. I certainly have been, and we wrote the reports ourselves, and there was no staff. So the idea that this is somehow so big and so overwhelming that it will be impossible to do strikes me as odd, given that CTO&S in the past has done exactly that, and other committees have done exactly that. And the other thing, so finally, the one big advantage of the periodic review that follows the standing committee's regular work is that things that come up can get either, sort of assigned to, this issue keeps coming up. We should really take a look at it when we do that review. It doesn't need to be addressed now. It's not immediate, but it keeps coming up. So we should add it to the agenda when we're doing this comprehensive review. Perfect example would be paying the select board and school committee. which is about to come up for the third time in like 6 years, right? And it would be so much better for us to consider paying the select board and school committee after a study of structure and organization that identified the problems that might be solved by paying the select board and school committee, right? But we don't
And
have the benefit
advisory
of that.
committee.
What?
And advisory committee. Nobody
And right,
ever
and
mentions
advise, let's
that.
pay everybody, right? So we consider lots of things without the context of this broader review of structure and organization, without this broader context of a study of the implications of doing that, right? I would love to know whether or not the problems that might be identified in this kind of a study could be, I mean, whether any of them would be solved by paying the select board or school committee, right? Or whether or not the issues that come up based on workload and authority and efficiency and all of those things would be completely unaffected. And so those are the problems we should be focusing on, not just the paying. I'm just giving that as an example of things that in the regular course of doing business as CTO&S, in the regular course of what the job is, and that familiarity with the structure and organization and the issues that continue to come up that are frustrating to some piece of the organizational structure, those can be assigned. You can put a pin in it and say, we either need to look at it now, in which case it's a narrow focus, or this sounds like something that should be done in the context of that bigger review. So that's again one of the reasons that it's proposed the way it is, and it's proposed for a committee that is a standing committee the rest of the time, that is doing this other very good work that many of you have made reference to. And I think that's where I'm going to end, because everybody's exhausted and I can't think of what else to say.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca. Before public safety goes into deliberation, and we have three people, Janice, Danelle, and Neil, who want to jump in there. As far as the voting process goes, we normally just take one vote on an article up or down, or vote to refer it or whatever. But there are two separate sections in here that I think are separate enough that maybe we want to consider having two votes. One vote on the appointing authority and one vote on the periodic review. And I wanted to get an idea if you're comfortable with that. I also want to know if the Public Safety Subcommittee is ready to vote tonight, or do you think we want to have another meeting and deliberate more on that? So let's get that out of the way, and then we'll call on people to talk.
Yeah, so
Mark, I'm sorry,
can I
can I just
respond
say,
to?
Oh,
can I just say one more thing?
Yeah.
Because I didn't address the appointment authority.
Okay, go ahead.
So on the appointment authority, I appreciate what everybody's been saying. When I talked to the Collins Center, frankly, about the appointment authority, the Collins Center folks raised some of the same issues that you raised tonight. The petitioners didn't feel that it was as, desperate, oh my God, somebody's going to try to manipulate the outcome of this comprehensive study. It just didn't feel that way. And it's about appointments to a standing committee anyway that has ongoing work. It's not just about this particular thing. So, but I did want to say that that it's not, David, Mark, you had said, where's the evidence that this is needed? The change in the appointing authority is not a need to have. We thought it would be a good to have for all of the reasons we explained. But it's certainly not as everyone has said, it's not the meat of what this article is trying to do. And it's definitely the least important part of the changes that we're trying to make.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca. So subcommittee members, do we want to try and vote tonight, or do we want to have a second meeting? Let's get that out of the way now.
So I would say vote tonight, and on the question of dividing this into two pieces, I think it's logically makes sense to divide it. I'd hate to have to come back after the advisory committee suggests that we divide it. I think we can vote the two sections separately, and I would do that tonight. I'm ready to vote.
Okay, Elisa, what do you think?
I support splitting it as well, and I still am not comfortable with the first one. I'm comfortable with the second one. So I don't know where that leaves me.
Okay, Janice?
Yeah, I think we should maybe do two votes. I think we should split it, but I think we should do an overall vote as well.
Okay. Well, if one vote is yes and the other vote is no, the overall vote will be very interesting to define that. Jocelyn?
I'm fine with two votes.
Okay, Liz?
Like the idea of two votes.
Okay. So in order of people texting me on the chat there, Janice is first, then Donnell, and then Neil.
Thank you.
So, okay, so first we're gonna do about the authority, right? Adding the select board on. So, I appreciate Rebecca's comments on that just now. And thank you for adding, that extra information that you received, which is helpful. I feel that yeah, I feel that CTO&S should be more independent of an elected body. And I also appreciate the fact that the moderator can seek people from a wider pool. I think that is really important. Um, at the select board level, sometimes there are a lot of candidates that they interview for spots, but sometimes there just aren't. And I think this is a body that benefits from having broad expertise because the issues that town meeting brings to them are pretty far reaching. So, I'm a no on adding select board authority.
Okay, Donnell?
Thank you, David Mark. So I have a comment. And it's out of scope for this. So my idea was to increase the number of CTO&S members, like to relieve some of the burden of the folks already on the committee. If there's a few more folks on that committee, that might help with diversity and other whatever else is we see an issue is we just increase the number by a few. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay. And as I said, good idea, slightly out of scope for this particular warrant article. But there is a fall town meeting. Neil Gordon.
So do you want me to limit this to the first half and then?
Yeah, let's do that because that'll keep us
Okay,
on.
so yeah, so I've said about all I have to say on that subject, and I'd be recommending no action on adding select board appointments.
Okay, I'll say that while I'm also inclined to vote no on that, I do appreciate Marissa's points about the fact that the moderator does not seem to advertise vacancies. For many years, there haven't been vacancies for decades. I mean, they just sort of stay on there forever. But he did at town meeting mention that he had openings for advisory committee members. I remember, he invited people to apply to the advisory.
To Atlantic, because then I can see what he says to that.
Okay, so we could recommend that the moderator does a better job of advertising when there are vacancies on CTO&S. I do think it's important not to politicize it. I don't want the members appointed by the select board to be seen as the political appointed members. So there are two different kinds of members on CTO&S. I don't think that's a good idea. But again, that's not the meat of the issue. I think, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And again, CTO&S is the best committee in town. And we have to be really appreciative of the fact that the professionalism, the in-depth reporting, their solutions to issues that come before them. I really think that we should continue the current model because it's working really well. And that's all I have to say. Jocelyn, Liz, do you want to add anything to this part?
No, I agree with the comments that have been made.
Likewise.
Okay, so are we ready for a vote on the first part? Okay, so I'll move favorable action on the section regarding the appointing authority, giving the select board votes on the appointing of members to the CTO&S. Is there a second?
So you're doing this as a in our usual fashion.
Right,
where
we
you
always do
you move
favorable
it, you
action.
move it in a positive, you
We
move
move
it
it in
in
a
a positive.
positive way, and then if you're against it, you vote no, and if you're in favor, you vote yes. So,
Okay,
second,
sure.
And, yeah,
go ahead.
I was gonna second, but Neil beat me to it.
I apologize. I was hiccuping at Jocelyn actually seconded.
Okay, so we were required to do a roll call vote, so I'll just call the people as I see them on the screen. Neil,
No.
Janice,
No.
Jocelyn,
No,
Anel,
No.
Liz,
No.
Lisa.
I guess Janice reiterating my concern has made me go for no.
Okay, and I'll also vote no. Um, I think it's really good to have these discussions though, and we can ask the moderator to be more visible when there are vacancies, so that we can maybe attract a broader pool, as has been said. Let's talk about the second part now, the periodic review of government, where we're changing may to shall. Um, I think we'll leave out a vote on the and or, and then if Rebecca comes to the full AC with a solution, we'll say we didn't vote on the and or, and then we'll let the full AC take care of that. And all right, so who wants to start? Obviously it's Neil.
Yeah, I'm not shy about starting. I want to speak a little bit to the expectation and what may be, implied, inferred, or otherwise. But included in the packet is a document that's titled Background Information for CTO&S Discussion relative to Warrant Article 11. And I've highlighted these parts, and I won't read anything but the parts I've highlighted. And it starts with the Mass Division of Local Services. And they state that, quote, all towns should strive to maintain bylaws that are complete, cohesive, and up to date. And as I said, this is the interpretation of what this warrant article is proposing by CTO&S in this memo. And then we get to individual cities and towns and and their approach. Dedham, Bylaw Review Committee reviews proposed bylaws. Well, CTO&S does that every town meeting when appropriate, and the advisory committee does that every town meeting, regardless of whether it addresses organization and structure. Needham is a holistic review of bylaws to be current, clear, well-organized, not a forum for advancing policy within other boards, committees, or commissions. Andover, essentially an ad hoc bylaw review committee. Fall River reviews and reconsiders current changes. Sharon, Governance Review Committee, advised the Select Board on 7 topics of the Select Board's choosing. So they're not reviewing organization structure at all. Winchester reviews and recommends bylaw changes every 10 years, and that doesn't address organization and structure except to the extent that they might be in the bylaws. Milton is a review of the town's existing general bylaws, and so essentially the same thing. Further to the expectation, I can't separate the just simple change in the Warren article as printed as compared to the current bylaw from petitioner's explanation. And so it's a review, and CTO&S is going to decide. But the explanation calls for a comprehensive review, refers to a comprehensive review. And that, in combination with the bylaw, is a significant part of the legislative history, and I assure you, it will be referred to, 10 years from now, saying, hey, Ian Rothman, you're still on CTO&S. Thank you for your service. And take a look at what we said at town meeting and take a look at what the explanation was. And the review that CTO&S is proposing, that's not what town meeting had in mind, because what town meeting had in mind is right in the back here, calling for a comprehensive review. It sets a way different expectation than we're actually seeing in the proposed warrant article, and frankly, in the sort of downplaying of that expectation by the petitioners.
Okay, Jocelyn.
Thanks, David Mark. I just have a couple of comments, largely agreeing with my colleagues here. I first wanted to acknowledge the written comments that Jonathan Golden, he didn't speak, but he did submit written comments. And so I wanted to acknowledge those comments, which referred really to the part that we're talking about right now. So Ian referred earlier to the scope of this review, and I must agree with what Neil just said. Rebecca herself just used the word comprehensive in her comments. And so I think we are left with a question of what is expected from this committee that spends so much time so thoroughly reviewing the issues that are raised with it. I agree with David Mark. If it isn't broken, don't fix it. And if I were asked to make any changes to this bylaw, my change would be this, because I'm still stuck on this issue of the DPW and its reorganization, even though it's a creature of special legislation. I think it should read all recommendations on proposed changes in the organization and structure of municipal government in the town shall be referred to the CTO&S, and the CTO&S shall be responsible for reviewing and reporting its recommendations. That's the change that I would make. And then the way it would work is that, as those have suggested, as issues came up, the CTO&S, those issues would be referred to CTO&S as they should be. I don't know what happened with the DPW, but that would be my recommendation. But I do want to thank Rebecca and her team of petitioners for looking at this issue. I think it has been a really valuable conversation. So thank you, Rebecca, and your co-petitioners.
Okay, I don't see any other hands at the moment, so I'll just jump in. I have been of the opinion for many years that each generation that comes in should do a review of government, the laws. Do we still need this law? Is it working the way it's supposed to? Should we modify it? Should we get rid of it? Also, government structure. For example, we really do not need in the 21st century county government. That's a really good example right there. And yet we still have it. Do we still need a governor's council, which is an old colonial thing on how we pick judges? Another state example was during the Romney administration, when Governor Romney was in office, we found out that there was a law still on the books which outlawed interracial marriage. It had been completely forgotten. And then when they found it, the legislature quickly repealed it. The governor signed it, so it was gone. But a periodic review, each generation doing that probably would have caught things like that and things that are still out there that we don't even know that are still on the books. At the town level, there's a lot less of that, but an example would be the licensing thing. Do we really need the select board to take some of their valuable time to decide whether a certain restaurant can have tape music until midnight? No. There are things in town that we could review, and we do have a lot of town meeting members who don't wait for the 10-year period that you're talking about here. They just submit a warrant article like Alex does and Neil does and the others to just change it now. Why wait 10 years or however many years? Let's make it better now, which I think is a good approach, because we can look at each one on its own and do a good vetting of that. So that's where I'm coming from. I'm really in favor of periodic reviews. I think 10 years is not enough time between reviews. I don't think we need to do it 10 years. If you think about town meeting in 2018, not town meeting, but the town structure of government in 2018 versus 2028, is it really any different? Is there really a review that'll pop out anything? Because it's pretty much the same. Um, the vagueness of the language as to exactly uh, the extent of the scope of what CTO&S is being asked for, and Dick Benka talked about this as well. That troubles me because it should be more specific. It should be better explained to CTO&S and in the bylaw, saying we expect this to be looked at, rather than just a vague, comprehensive type of review, which could just get bogged down very easily. Or it could, CTO&S could interpret the vagueness of the language to say, let's just have one meeting. Anybody have any ideas on improving town government? No? Okay, we're done. See you in 10 years. So while I'm not really in favor of this language, although I do approve the concept of it, and I don't want to overwhelm C2S, I'm wondering, at the risk of enraging C2S where they start burning down my house, of whether we could refer this section to C2S to look at ways the town can do a periodic review, and how we would define it and how we would frame it, and does it really need to be 10 years? Would 20 years be better? All of that stuff. And I can see that Kate wants to kill me right now. But but I'm wondering if referral would serve a purpose, or should we just vote it up and down? And if anybody on C2S wants to pop in on this, please do so, because I'd like to hear what you guys think about this concept of looking at that, a holistic review, and maybe coming back with a better, more detailed language in sometime in the future. Anybody? Kate, you unmuted.
Yeah,
I apologize to all of members of CTO&S for what I just about the referral proposal, but yeah.
I'm not sure that a referral would be the best course of action relating to this article. Especially a referral to CTO&S, because Ian, you explain why. Like, because of the conflict of interest that exists in asking it to do so. But that's my visceral reaction. Ian, you can do the intellectual explanation.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to express an opinion without, I think maybe we could talk about that at our meeting. I was expecting the idea of referral to come up earlier than 8:43, to be honest. And there is certainly some logic to people wanting to ask CTO&S's opinion about this. I'm not sure what my opinion is on referral at the moment.
Fair enough. Janice, you had your hand up. Do you want to chime in now, or you're muted?
I did, but I'd rather hear at this point from Dick Benka since you asked the question. Yeah.
I will follow really what Ian just said. I think the question of referral or CTO&S's response in general to this article is something that we're going to have to discuss on April 21st.
Okay.
And rather than have individuals give their individual opinion at this point, I think it would be more appropriate for us to do it after that meeting.
Okay, fair enough. So how does the Public Safety Subcommittee think about that?
So I do.
Hold on, I'm getting both an up arrow and a down arrow from Donnell. So
yeah, I want to vote it up. I want to vote it up and down.
Okay. I didn't know if you were choosing both of them. All right, Janice?
Yes, thanks, David Mark. So I was going to take a different approach. There seems to be consensus that there is value to doing a periodic review. I was going to recommend that we change the shall back to may. And then, we have some time to think about how we're going to do this. I know, Rebecca, that's probably not what you want to hear because you're very deliberately changed may to shall. but I don't want to lose the parts of this that, the thinking behind it that you and your co-petitioners had that actually is of value to the town. So,
I appreciate that, Janice. It's just that if you want to change it back to May, then just vote it down because the existing bylaw says that.
but you have additional language that the bylaw does not have.
No,
You
we
added
really,
more language. Yeah.
we really didn't, not in that section.
I thought I did read that. Let's see.
We added,
Oh, yeah, shall conduct and or contract for review of the organization and structure. of the
So, yeah.
But the and/or, all we added was the slash and the or. It already said and.
Then why is it all bold and italicized? If it's not all been added to the.
Wait a minute.
Right,
Wait,
it
no.
adds in addition. That's new language.
Yeah.
In addition is new language because we were moving to shall, but let me just see.
Wait, but did it previously have and or contract for review?
No, and that was
Right,
so the and or contract for the review is definitely new language. But
As-
there's
as
in
is the timing.
in the second to last line, there is an and that exists. We added a slash or to on proposing action. So it was and make recommendations. It used to say make recommendations concerning modification and propose action to modify and change, which is redundant. We changed it to make recommendations and or propose action to modify and change, which doesn't, as I said, all it does is clean it up, but it doesn't actually change anything about the language. So the fundamental change is changing the may from time to time conduct to shall conduct.
Right.
That's the main change. All of the other language pertaining to organization and structure, modify and change the organization and structure, and the words including operating departments and committees is in the current bylaw.
I guess one could argue that adding and or contract for perhaps makes it seem like a more substantial analysis.
Right. So, and we added and or contract for because we were adding a mandatory decennial review. And that's what we're saying may contract for. We're not saying may contract for the work in between those reviews. Because that would.
Which, by the way, CTO&S can recommend contracting for that kind of consulting engagement anytime they want to. They can't appropriate the money and they don't have the authority to do it on their own, as they won't have the authority to do it on their own, notwithstanding the bylaw as proposed, should it become the bylaw.
Right.
It would still require an appropriation.
The idea of writing it that way was because it's a decennial review, there is
It would
time
still
to
require an appropriation. It's not something that CTO&S can do on their own.
No. And so you can add in and or contract for should the budget allow. We didn't add in those words. But the anticipation of it allows.
Janice's recommendation is that we go back to May, which is the existing bylaw. And once you go back
Which is
to
what
May,
Rebecca doesn't want, right?
I mean, let me
all I'm
finish.
saying is
Once it goes, excuse me, once we go back to May, then there's no reason for the language that relates to the timeline, nor the language that suggests that they engage in a consultant, all of which, if any committee, right, board, committee, or commission in town government knows how to take up a study, recommend appropriation, engage a consultant, this is the committee that knows how to do that.
That's fine. Neil, I appreciate that you don't want this and that you're going to vote no on
So
it. But all I'm saying is if you go back to the word may, for
I know
me,
that's Janice's.
that is the same
Are we
thing as
deliberating,
voting.
or are we getting yet another negotiation from the petitioner. I'm just
It's not a
asking.
negotiation. I'm just
just
Okay,
asking.
saying.
I'll speak on Rebecca's behalf. It doesn't
Thank
make
you.
sense to change it to May because that's what the warrant article said originally, which is if that's what you want, you should say no, right?
Yeah,
Yes,
well,
thank you.
that's what we're saying, that Janice's proposal to change it back to May is a reversion to the existing bylaw, right? In which case you don't need to approve any change whatsoever, therefore you vote no. Yes,
Which
that's
is
what I'm
exactly
saying.
what I was saying to
An up or
Janice.
down vote.
That's
Right.
exactly what I was saying to Janice,
Yes.
Neil.
Okay, so we're all on the same page now. Any other subcommittee member want to weigh in on the second part before we come to a vote?
Well, I support it, but um, I don't have much more to say. I think it's useful to have a periodic review, and shall makes us do it, and it doesn't say that it's supposed to be a thorough review. But I do think it can look at, oh, gee, right, exactly what Janice was saying too. Hey, we've been doing licensing by the select board, and there's all these things issues that come up, and if Neil or Alec haven't chosen to write some kind of a bylaw proposal to change it, there's a point at which everything does get reviewed. So.
Well, CTO&S can take up anything they want on their own. I could write a letter to CTO&S asking them to take up this as a subject, and can this be improved?
Of
So
course
that's
they could, but this is just saying there's value to stepping back and saying, are there efficiencies that we can get by doing X or Y? I just don't see this as such a torturous perspective. I think it's something that we should be doing.
So I acknowledge the value of the periodic review. As I said, there is no magic timeline for a periodic review. And all it takes to encourage CTO&S to take up the kind of review that would be called for in the warrant article would be for town meeting to pass a resolution to that effect. And I assure you that CTO&S, as I know it, would take that seriously.
Right. So Neil, you would have to write a resolution and then have town meeting vote on it, and then we'll do it. But the other option is it's just there in the
not me.
bylaws.
Any
I'm just
10,
saying
not
anyone, Joe
10
Schmo.
any 10 voters at any time who think they need, in anticipation of town meeting, which meets at least twice a year, right? Anytime, any 10 voters think that it's appropriate that we do a comprehensive review, or define it any way you want, any 10 voters can put that on the warrant as a resolution, right? And town meeting will take it up, and town meeting will agree or disagree. And that doesn't have to be to any particular timeline. That's driven by changes in circumstance that may be national, international, state, something that one of our
Right,
abutting
Neil, I hear
neighbors,
you on that. I
or
hear you.
anything else at
Right.
any time,
Of course.
including in November.
Right. But that's different from, is there a value to requiring some entity to make a periodic review? Maybe there's a new maybe there's a new kind of town manager option that we never knew about.
Well, that's exactly right. Maybe the week after that, someone should file a warrant article.
Right, but maybe they won't. So
Well,
you have a chance to do it.
Then we're talking about some overwhelming percentage. Overwhelming percentage only takes 10 signatures on a petition. If nobody thinks that's important, right? Perhaps we don't need to go through the exercise.
Janice?
Yes. So I'm starting to think that we need to hear from CTO&S before we take a vote on this part. I don't think that we can guide CTO&S since they're the ones that are being asked to do this role, and I need to better understand their capacity for doing this warrant article. We're asking them to take on a pretty, I know the petitioners don't think it's a big deal, but I'm not sure that that's how CTO&S feels about it. That's why when I was talking about a separate committee, I was thinking about a bigger organization than a 7-person um, group to do the work. Because I do think there is value in it. I'm just not sure that this is the group that has the capacity, even with hiring a consultant. And I will say, I've not been really impressed by consultants that have done work for the town because much of the time it's clear that they don't know Brookline. And they get our street names wrong. They don't really know how we live in Brookline. They don't really know the different areas of Brookline, and yet they're telling us what we need. And so um I I'm not even sure that a consultant is really the best approach to figuring out, to evaluating structure of town government. That's just my personal view, that we spend thousands and thousands of money on consultants and they don't know us. None of them live here. They don't know us. And so I think that their value has, it's sometimes good to get an outside perspective. There is value to that. But when push comes to shove, I really care about people who have a deeper understanding of the town and the people who live here. So I'm
David,
I'm not
agree
ready to
with
vote
Janet.
on this part.
David, Mark, if I might, and I'll say this quickly. If I was going to vote yes, I would want to know how CTO&S felt about taking on this assignment.
Okay.
But if I'm inclined to vote no, I don't care how they feel about, I always care how they feel, but I'm not concerned about them taking on this assignment.
Okay, and if we don't vote tonight, Carla Benka, who's on the call, is probably already started to rearrange the advisory committee schedule for Article 11. Liz Linder.
Oh, I just wanted to jump on that. Janice, I basically agree with you on this pretty thoroughly. And as far as consultants go, yes, great to get an outside opinion, but most of them don't seem to be really in it. So the workload is real.
All right, so am I hearing that we don't want to vote on this tonight, that we want to wait for C2 and S to go ahead and do it first and then?
I'd like to vote on it tonight.
You know what, I'm just wondering, can CTO&S, can they, it wouldn't increase the scope if they could find wording that would better clarify the amount of work that would be required. Is that true? Is there something that CTO&S could do that would improve the wording to make it more clear without going beyond the scope?
That's what they do. So
No.
future meeting, if they can figure out a language that will be passable, then I'm sure they'll support it.
Right. Well, I'm just suggesting that, and if it's possible, then I think that could be a good idea.
Hanel?
Yeah, I don't know if we're at the same meeting or not, but I'm pretty sure the members from the CTO&S don't want this extra weight on them. I think this is what I've been gathering these few hours that we've been at this meeting. So I'm inclined to vote up or down on this. Thank you.
I'm inclined to vote on what's in front of us. And if CTO&S loves this and comes back with additional clarifying language, then fine, we can reconsider and the full advisory committee can consider the language that comes from there. But we have a proposal in front of us. We have an article printed in the warrant, and that's what we've been deliberating. And I think we ought to vote up or down on it.
I think there's a majority of the subcommittee that wants to vote tonight, and we can reconsider our position if there's new language to come forward. So I'm not sure if I moved this already, so I'll move favorable action on the part of warrant article 11, periodic review of government.
Second,
Okay, so I'll do a roll call again. Donnell,
No.
Elisa,
I'll be the one, yes.
Janice,
Yeah, Danelle convinced me, no.
okay, and Liz Linder,
No.
Jocelyn Murphy,
No.
Neil Gordon.
no.
Okay, and I will, with sympathy toward the concept and hoping that the language can be improved, I'll vote no at this time. So at exactly 9 o'clock, we're done for the evening. I want to thank all of you for hanging in there for all this time. It's been a really interesting conversation, and I know there are going to be interesting conversations to come with this warrant article. It went a little longer than I thought it would, but I think it was worth it. And to the members of the CTO&S and to the petitioners that stuck around, to the members of the public, thank you so much for sticking around and staying for this whole meeting. Carla, technically, when does Article 11 come before AC, the full AC?
It can be the April 16th or April 21st, depending on the availability of the petitioners and CTO&S members.
Okay, so we'll probably realistically have it in early May. All right.
So CTO&S is voting on the 21st, so it's kind of,
Yeah, so if we're gonna have them AC, it should be after they voted.
that's 5. That's true. That might actually be a really good date to do it.
Okay, well, then it's going to be April 31st, 32nd. You tell me.
32nd works for me. Everybody else?
Okay, good.
No, I was thinking the 21st would probably be better than the earlier date because, we might have hot off the press input from CTO&S.
Yeah, we're just sort of creeping into the territory of the Chestnut Hill rezoning articles, which,
And the combined reports being due.
yeah, yep.
Do the best we can.
All right, why don't I will assume it's not going to be on the 16th, and it will be probably later than the 21st.
Yeah, and regarding Andrew Fisher's 2 articles, he gets back into the country on the 5th. He told me that the first couple Wednesdays of April are not good for him whatsoever. Mondays are not good for the AC, so I'm trying to find some date. He suggested the April 15th for the subcommittee hearing, which would push full AC back a bit. I'm trying to see if there's a date, maybe on a Tuesday or Thursday, when we can meet on them before full AC. So I'll get back to you on that when he gets back to me.
This is the data and the surveillance.
Exactly, those 2 articles.
Okay.
But he's been out of the country. So, yeah.
Carla, can I also ask on Article 10 that we did earlier, is that on the schedule for the full AC, or will that be the same day?
Same day, 10 or 11, same day.
Let me stop the recording.